It's February 20th, 2023. This is Roqe. Well, hi there. Welcome to episode 240 of Roqe. The Islamic Republic is a threat to journalists around the world. I'm Jian Ghomeshi. Hello to you from Toronto. Salam dostan aziz. Durud bar shoma. The Islamic Republic is a dangerous threat to journalists around the world. Now, I know this statement probably sounds redundant to many of you. And why even limit this to journalists? Might it be more expedient to just say the Islamic Republic is a threat to the world, which is fairly accurate and omnibus? But we would do a disservice to the severity of recent events to gloss over the latest manifestation of a terrorist regime that is not just intent on suppressing and depressing the people inside Iran, but shows no hesitance about expanding such activities globally. Basically, everyone who opposes this current regime is a target, anywhere, anytime, but particularly journalists and media who set out to report the truth about this murderous theocracy. So to recap, you may have heard the news that Iran International TV Network is now being forced to move all of its operations that have been till now based in London, England, to Washington, D.C., America, due to alarming security concerns. An entire network is moving due to threats from Iran. That is, the country that officially has the worst record in the world of detaining and killing journalists, now exporting its crackdown campaign beyond its borders. And set aside what you might think of Iran International, some of its on-air people, its funding, its content, whatever. Because the reality is that there are a lot of talented reporters, anchors, producers, researchers at that network that deserve to be able to do their jobs without fear of their own lives being taken. The Islamic Republic is a threat to journalists around the world. In case you missed it on the weekend, after a significant escalation in state-backed threats from Iran and advice from the Metropolitan Police in Britain, Iran International reluctantly closed its London studios and moved broadcasting to Washington. Word is the threats had grown to the point that it was felt that it was no longer possible to protect the channel's staff. Now, think about how insane that is. We get used to this as a global Iranian community, horrific stories at the hands of the Ayatollahs over 44 years. But we should never think them normal. A broadcast network in a Western country with many British citizens among its staff is being forced to move its operations across the world to keep its workers safe after months of threats from the Iranian government. So much for sovereignty, security, and free speech in the UK when the brutal regime in Iran is at play. The Islamic Republic is a threat to journalists around the world. To their credit, the Iran International team say they will refuse to be silenced and will continue broadcasting, but it should never come to this. For those Western countries still playing footsie with the regime in Iran and hoping to establish a new nuclear deal, this stuff is on your hands. Whether it's the journalists detained and tortured inside the country, those threatened abroad like Masih Alinejad, or an entire broadcast network having to move its place to keep its staff in a safe space, the world's journalists will have to continue to watch their back and remain on the run until a revolution to rid this Islamic regime is done. Coming up on this new edition of Roqe, Part 7 of our ongoing series, Voices from Inside Iran. Today we speak to 4 brave young frontline demonstrators in Gilan, Tehran, Shiraz, and Rasht for their perspectives on the state of the uprising from inside the belly of the beast. Plus the Roqe Roundtable convenes. This is Roqe, episode 240, The Uprising, Voices from Inside Iran. Right, here we go. Alive and kicking in Toronto. These are some of my favorite episodes when we do the Voices from Inside Iran.
Yeah.
And we haven't done it in a while because we did it every week for a while. And then we felt like there wasn't. It's not that there wasn't lots to say, but they were kind of we were caught up with them, you know, because we were using speaking to the same people each week with pseudonyms, different names, different locations to keep their anonymity. But now, after a couple of months, we want to check in with some of the people, a couple of new people, and a couple of people we'd spoken to before. And it's such a window into what people, especially young people, especially people who've been demonstrating, who are, you know, part of the uprising, the movement, the revolution, what they're thinking inside Iran. Because I think sometimes in San Diego or Calgary or Sydney or Toronto, we like to think we know what's going on, or we assume, but it's great it was so instructive throughout the fall that we would hear from these people inside Iran. So we're going to go to someone named Reza, not his real name, in the Gilan province. That's the north of Iran.
Yes.
And Behgol. Now, we had Behgol on before. Do you remember when last week on my opening essay I was talking about somebody I spoke to, and I said, what do you most want in a free Iran? And she said, just to be able to walk my dog. Yeah. She's this activist, but that was her answer that day. It's such a beautiful and simple answer. So we're going to go back to her in Shiraz, catch up with her 2 or 3 months later now. Yep. Since, I mean, she was almost arrested. Was she arrested the last time we spoke to her?
No, but her friend was beside her.
Her friend was arrested. That's right. And her friend became something of a cause célèbre, like became somebody that we...
Dena Sheibani, she was an athlete, and they put her in front of camera for like...
Forced confession, and So Behgol, which is her real name, unafraid, you know, she's going to... Then Som in Tehran, who we've had on a couple of times. Yep. He's always insightful and informative. And then Marjan, who is in a city in the north of Iran, which we won't expose. But she was arrested last time, I think we spoke to her.
Yes, correct.
Had just been released. And so she will certainly have some perspective.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear all of their perspectives, actually. It's like you said, it's such a window into what's really happening on the front lines, and so different from what we experience living outside of Iran.
I want to know if they're still as hopeful as they were before. I want to know if they're still as defiant as they were before. I suspect they will be, but we'll see. But I want to know how much they care about what's all of this stuff that seems to be the priority in the diaspora. Yeah. Are they consumed in the de facto leadership race and the coalition and even the big demonstrations today in Brussels? I know we're going to talk about that, but is that still making a difference to them inside Iran, right? Or have things moved on? It'll be really good to hear from them. What do you think of? What did you think when you heard this news about Iran International? I felt like I had to do my opening about that. And again, a disclaimer, it's really kind of irrelevant, frankly, whether you love the network or not. I mean, I assume we're going to get some people saying, why are you defending the Iranians? Because people don't, there's people who don't, everybody has an opinion. But there are people just trying to do their work. And it was astounding to me. Yeah. A network has to move out of England. I mean, it's not like it's in an unstable Middle Eastern country. I don't know, some place that you go, oh, well, of course. Well, what are you doing in that part of Syria or something? It's London, England.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a testament to exactly how far the tentacles of the Islamic regime expand and extend. And, to see them have this kind of an impact on, like you said, a network in the UK, I think it clarifies everything that we've been talking about the last few months about, their ability and the effect that the Islamic Republic has, even outside of Iran.
The Jur'at of the Islamic Republic. So it's like they don't have enough to take care of at home.
Yeah.
I exchanged voice messages with Farazad today, who's one of their big anchors, and he was saying, just saying, how you doing? Are you okay? Right. And he was saying, like, everything is crazy over there because they've committed themselves to continuing broadcasting, but they're moving their operations. So I think he was on air for 20 hours or something, that himself in DC, just trying to keep things going. And that's a major move, and it comes, these threats have been escalating, and once the police say, listen, we think you guys better get out. I mean, the whole thing is
that's the other
crazy.
thing. I mean, I'm sure that with, Iran International's programming, I'm sure they've gotten the odd threat and
of course,
whatnot here and there. But
and to be fair, you got to know what you're getting into.
Exactly.
I mean, surely they do.
They've
been the most outspoken, I guess, with Manitou.
That's right. Yeah, but what I mean is, I'm sure they've had their fair share of this over the last who knows how many years. But it's gotten to such an extent,
a breaking point
that you, like you mentioned in your essay, with the police coming into it and them saying it's not safe, and for them to feel that their operation is at risk and their staff are at risk.
I honestly kind of, not because I don't think of this regime is capable of horrendous things, but I almost didn't believe it entirely when I was like, what? Really?
Yeah.
Come on. There must be some other, maybe they're, they had to close a division for cut costs or downsize or something. I mean, it seemed crazy to me, but it's obviously believable.
It's crazy, but it's the reality of the Islamic Republic.
But it's not even the Islamic Republic. It's the UK. It's in the UK.
But I mean, I know it's in the UK, but it's as a result of, the Islamic Republic.
Yeah.
So even with them being in the UK and feeling that, there should be some level of safety and sovereignty, like you mentioned.
Masih El-Najad in
yeah,
Brooklyn.
That's another example.
People coming after her. I mean, it's scary stuff. The tentacles of this regime.
Yeah.
Listen, before we get to the Roqe Roundtable, I wanted to, because I always leave this too long, I wanted to talk about our patrons.
Yes.
Actually, our Roqe members on
members.
Patreon.
Yes.
Because we've set up, this is brand new. We set up a new Patreon page. So this is all very new, and we're just developing, we're just building our crowdsourcing here. But we operate through crowdfunding, and so that means that people can subscribe to become a Roqe member. And we had been using another system, which still is operating for now, but we've moved everything over to Patreon because it's very user-friendly, it's very easy, and also because we wanted to be able to give back. So depending on the category that you're in, like there's bronze, silver, gold, and they're not huge. I mean, it's like a $10 a month or $20 a month, that kind of thing. I think the gold category now, you get a week in Greece with Roham or something. You get an entire.
I thought it was with Shaya.
You get a month of brunch with Shaya. No, the prizes are phenomenal. But part of it is we wanted to give some shout outs to people who are signing on as Patreons. So Aaron Debray. Aaron Debray, thank you. You have become a bronze Roqe member, as has Nazila Rafizadeh.
Yes.
I'd be saying that correctly,
Nazila Rafizadeh.
Nazila Rafizadeh.
Yes. Janice
Franco.
Yes.
Very Persian name.
Yes.
From the Azeri region, I think, the Francos. Janice Franco, a bronze member. Thank you to you, Janice. And Sohrab Masoudi, a gold member. Has become a gold member on our... So go to our website, roqemedia.com, and I'll do something like this, 3 or 4 names each week, each episode. And go to our roqemedia.com, press the Support Us button.
That's right.
Takes you to the Patreon page. Signing up is really easy.
Very easy. Or if you're already familiar with Patreon, you can just simply search Roqe Media and it'll take you right to our page.
All right. And Patreon is the name of the platform. It's an easy interface to be able to just sign up and become a Roqe member. Thank you to you guys who are doing so. We really, really appreciate it. Now, before we get to Voices from Inside Iran, I think we're going to actually start in Gilan and this guy named Reza, who I know has an interesting story to tell. Let's just get to a little bit of what's been happening today. Seemingly, in the day trading of what's happening in the Iranian community and what's happening with the uprising, today was a big day because all eyes were on Brussels, where there was a demonstration with thousands and thousands of folks there. This was in an effort to make the case that the IRGC should be put on the terrorist list in Europe, and we saw Hamid Ismailian and Masih El-Najad and Ali Okhondi, your guy, Shaya. Shaya like once said he likes the guy, so now it's his guy. Yeah. But a lot of those folks were there. So tell us a bit about what this event today.
Well, there was reports of over 6,000 people in attendance. So that was, huge numbers. We've seen, I'm sure a lot of videos have been circulating. And
is that a huge number? Not for Toronto.
Not for Toronto, but I still think even anywhere in the thousands, when you start to see these videos and you're part of that crowd and you get that sense, I think it's a big number.
And to be honest, Brussels, not a hotbed of the Iranian diaspora.
That's right. That's right. And
so a lot of people would have come from other places.
Well, that's what I was going to say, is that there was a large number of individuals who actually traveled from all over Europe to be part of this and to be part of this demonstration and to really have their voice heard. And it coincided with, I believe there was a meeting of the EU foreign ministers today, and this is actually where individuals were gathered. So the discussion at this meeting or conference, I guess, was in fact the sanctions, and so it was really important to have these individuals out there in the thousands to have their voice heard outside of this conference taking place.
Yeah, it looked it looked fiery and impressive, and I would hope made an impression.
Definitely.
We're working on bringing somebody on Thursday who was there to talk about it. But it was also another moment where we saw some of these, I still don't know what we call them, de facto leaders, public figures, people who have become the familiar faces of the opposition in outside of Iran.
That's right.
In the same place. So a couple of days ago we saw Masih Alinejad and Reza Pahlavi and Nazanin Boniadi at the Munich conference.
That's
and
right.
now in Brussels, we see Masih and Hamed and a few others. And I think that seems to be stirring the hearts of Iranians. I say that because I see people sharing that on social media. Look, and there's pictures of like three of them, and everybody's likes it and gets excited, or somebody says something negative. But that seems to be the subtext of
this. That's right. And I think we're going to be seeing more of that, because coming up on the 22nd, there's going to be a demonstration in Rome that I know Masih Alinejad and Hamed Esmailioun are both going to be at.
Do you think that there's more than one Masih Alinejad?
There honestly could be. She's very
she's
active.
The Energizer Bunny. Yeah. I don't understand how much Red Bull can one person consume to be in every location.
She's a clone.
She's always she's very well spoken. She's very fiery and has a lot of energy but it's like, wow, how does this person not? I mean, most people would be wrecked after one of these events, like, okay, I need a week off now. And she's very, very impressive that way. She seems to be, representing, maybe she has some help or some people around her that hopefully they're supporting her and keeping her healthy, because that's certainly important. So what was your takeaway from, we won't really know much about what came out of Brussels today. I mean, it's obviously a powerful demonstration. We'll see if it shifts anything in Europe. Although this EU guy,
Joseph Borrell.
Yes. He
said, like, I don't care about this demonstration. It won't change anything in our rules.
The weird thing is how committed this guy. Like, he doesn't even tactfully kind of go, well, we're still studying that. He's really like playing to the regime.
Exactly.
Like, no, I'm not going to listen to these people. Don't worry. Let's do a deal. It's this is the president of the EU or something like that. What's his official position?
High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy.
Maybe he's the high representative.
Yeah, honestly.
So wasted that he doesn't.
I mean, how do you not have a clue? Like, or do you?
Does have a clue.
This is your agenda that you're pushing.
No, of course, he has a clue. The clue is, let's do a deal, and there's millions at stake, and we don't care. We don't care about democracy or freedom or human rights or whatever in Iran. That's the clue. More than a clue, sadly. So, but maybe obviously there's a lot of efforts, and these kind of events like Brussels today make a big difference. There's another one in Rome in a couple of days too.
Yeah, that's going to be on the 22nd. That's going to be a demonstration. Like I said, Masih Alinejad and Hamed Esmailioun will both be there. And I'm sure there's going to be, again, thousands who show up, because, again, within Europe, I think there's a lot of people who travel from varying cities, and so that helps the numbers and the impact.
Now, what did you make of the Munich conference on Friday? I mean, some of these things, I always wonder, we're so hungry as the Iranian community to see progress, to see things happening, that I kind of think, well, did we care about the Munich conference on security before? like now it's a really big deal to us. But these are all steps.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, the regime in this case, representatives were intentionally not invited, and instead representatives of the opposition, in the diaspora were there. That's a big deal.
Well, I think that's actually the biggest deal out of, we've seen time and time again where, these opposition leaders, if that's what we're calling them, again, still so unsure of what to refer to them as. But,
let's call them that for now.
But yeah, let's call them that. We've seen other places where they've had an opportunity to speak. We saw at Georgetown that panel, and we've seen them over the course of the last few months, but this marked the first time that they were invited instead of representatives of the Islamic Republic. So I think that in and of itself was huge, to see that some organization in the West is finally opening up their eyes and choosing to have a conversation with Iranians as opposed to the regime. So I think that in and of itself was really helpful. And aside from that, a lot of the conversation that was had at the conference was, in my opinion, amazing. I mean, there were individuals, I think the chair of the Senate of Foreign Relations Committee from the Munich conference.
Which is an American.
Yes, Robert Mendez. Yes, that's right. He's American. So he was actually saying that, he expressed his support for Iranians, and he said that anyone in the West who is still choosing to cooperate or to have conversations or anything with the Islamic Republic is actually tragically confused and doesn't understand the difference between Iranians and the Islamic Republic.
Speak to your admin there in the U.S.,
Yeah,
buddy.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. And then we had Hannah Newman, who's a member of the European Parliament, and she's been, she's vocalized her support for the revolution over the past couple of months. But there were a couple of things that she said that really stood out to me, actually. And one of the things was that she mentioned that as long as the regime kills its own people, we are not going to negotiate with them. So the fact that she actually voiced that.
So who does she represent?
She's a member of the European Parliament. Yeah. And then the other thing that she said that the
European Parliament did actually pass the resolution
That's
to
right.
say, but the European Parliament, I wonder how.
European Parliament, yes, but European
Union. No.
Yes.
The European Union is where the power really is.
Yes.
So that's why I don't even know what the European Parliament, with respect, because I know that some of them have been great, speaking out and great. I'm not sure what dominion they have over anything.
I don't think it's necessarily a matter of dominion. I think it's more so having these representatives say these things will allow others to open up their eyes and to have, it's a stepping stone.
Very much appreciated. Yes,
Yeah.
I just it doesn't seem to be shifting any of the European countries to action. But
I mean, I think we've said it over the last few months that all of these things have to happen in conjunction with each other, and it's not just one thing. So, I'm
it's perhaps
maybe
an
still
accumulation.
hopeful. Yeah,
Yes,
exactly. The other thing that she mentioned that I wanted to note is that she actually talked about the nuclear threat, which is something that we know has been, at the forefront of many conversations. And so she said the best way to get rid of the nuclear threat is to get rid of the regime. And so that was, again, something that I thought was
well said.
Well said, exactly.
By the way, did you feel like the nuclear threat is generating more conversation? I don't want to say conspicuously so, but maybe I'm implying that. Is generating more conversation these days than it has been up until now?
Perhaps we'll see some negotiations. Is that what you're thinking?
No, it's not. Well, either that. Like it's like we need to, maybe it's being used to as a pretext to we need to make a deal with Iran because the nuclear threat is looming closer, or the opposite. It's a pretext for some kind of intervention. Like it's like the Saddam Hussein,
Right.
We've got to stop these crazy tyrants. It just seems like it's that from both sides. The conversation is amping up, and maybe the reality is there's just more evidence that Iran is nefariously working on this stuff. I don't know.
I mean, I don't think there's been any evidence to show that they haven't been for, months now. It's not even in the past 5 months. It's even preceding that. So, but again, like you said, it is kind of conspicuous.
That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and also we have to not forget about the Russia-Ukraine war. So, and Russia on side of Iran, and we already knew that Russia kind of Russia is building the nuclear systems in Iran. So that kind of makes sense.
That's a good thing to not forget about. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
talking more about the
That's
Munich.
it. But by the way, that's always a downer when we're like, I think we've isolated Iran except for China and Russia and some of the other superpowers
Not to
that
mention,
are supporting. Excellent.
Good to know.
I think Iran has no friends left except for,
some powerful friends for sure.
Yeah.
Then when we were talking about the Munich Security Conference, I wanted to talk about some of the things that Masih Alinejad and Reza Pahlavi mentioned while they were there. So Masih expressed her concern over the lack of coordinated support for Iranian protesters in the community, in the international community, that is. And she actually went on to say that, or she spoke on behalf of Iranians and said that we want the Western countries to announce their policy towards Iran and to isolate the regime the way they have with Russian President Putin. So that was one of the things. And then Reza Pahlavi discussed more about his, this is something that I think he said before, but maximum pressure alongside maximum support. So this notion of, the West and the international community putting their maximum amount of pressure on the regime, but also supporting the Iranian people. So again, all of that was, I think, really, really great conversation coming out of
something that he
conference.
said that I thought was great. At that was he said the constitution of a new Iran should be based on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
Yes.
That's exactly what we need somebody to say, and what needs to happen. I thought that was great. And let me just say, shout out to Masih Alinejad, because her I don't know, a boldness or drive, is sometimes is really impressive, because she's not afraid to. She made a video with Macron. Did you see that?
I did. I saw parts of it.
And she kind of goes, "Come on, are you? You're going to support?" And who knows how much official effect that has. By putting him on video and getting Macron to go, "Yes, of course, I'll support democracy." Yeah. But it's impressive. It's not something that you necessarily see many others do. Reza Pahlavi is not going to go up to Macron and go, "Come on, what do you? I need an answer now." And so it's good. It's having her on these front lines. You have these moments that are like, wow, that's the president of France, and she's like she did with Trudeau too. She kind of does, and it's good. It's strong. I mean, then the president of France shows up at
holding
hands with
exactly.
Raisi or whatever it was. But it's I think these moments are important.
They are, and I mean the court of public opinion, right? The fact that the international community sees these videos, and then on the front line, on the headline of news, sees photos of that same president with the Islamic Republic. All of that causes a stir, and people talk about it more, and all of that I think is helpful. Speaking of, the spokesperson for the Foreign Ministry of Iran also commented on the Munich Security Conference, specifically on the fact that Reza Pahlavi was invited. So they said that
he's not a fan.
Oh, I mean, are you? What a shocker, right?
Yeah.
To quote him, he said, "Inviting the son of a deposed and fugitive dictator to the Munich conference is a mockery of the great nation of Iran."
Well,
so his 2 cents.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's not a surprise. These are things that it's interesting to me, because, and we'll talk to some of the people inside Iran in a few moments, because there was a month or two where things really seemed to be dipping, both in terms of street action and on the international stage, and all of a sudden, in the aftermath of the anniversary of the revolution and the reaction to that, and then people were out in the streets this past week last Thursday or whatever it was in Iran, and we're seeing all this activity in different parts of the world. It feels like there's a in that kind of dictum that idea that the revolution has steps and takes time and goes through morphs into different moments. This is all part of it, as you say, that
definitely. And like you said, we are seeing that kind of spike again, even inside Iran. I mean, there was this viral video of that engineer.
That was amazing.
That was
the woman
incredible.
Who took off everybody probably saw this, but describe it for those who haven't seen it.
So there was an annual assembly of the Tehran Construction Engineering Organization, and they were having some sort of, I guess, a meeting or yeah, I mean, an assembly.
These are the people my dad would think are the most important people because they're mohandes, you know?
Yes, a group of mohandes.
Yeah.
That's right. So, and this took place on the 17th. And essentially what was happening is that it was an announcement of a new board of directors, if I'm not mistaken. And an individual by the name of Zainab Kazempour came on stage, and she took the mic, and what she actually said was that she made a statement and started criticizing the organization, saying that, you know, there was discrimination, and that, you know, what does this organization stand for when someone like her is not allowed to be on the board of directors because of improper hijab. Now, she says all of this while having her scarf on her shoulders, so she's not wearing a hijab at this point when she's on the stage saying this. And then further to that, she stomps off stage and throws her headscarf into the crowd.
It was an amazing moment.
I mean, the show of bravery.
And most of the crowd claps.
That's right.
Cheers
yeah,
for her, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So that was great. That was a great moment. But do we know what happened to her? Because I haven't been following the...
I haven't seen anything, and truly, since I saw that video, I've just been watching out for this because I'm terrified for her. I mean, I almost expected that they would be standing at the door for her waiting when she came off that stage, but
yeah, they're looking for her, but I don't think that they've detained her so far.
They're looking for her?
They're looking
She's
for
in
her.
hiding?
I think so, yes.
Oh.
Yes. But, you know, it's interesting, like, I don't know if it's a good thing or bad thing, but it's just an observation that she took off her hijab and everyone claps, but they continue to their job, you know.
Yeah, and they cut her mic after a certain point.
What do you mean they continue to do
So
this?
I wish other people
They had walked out or something?
other people also they raised their voice against this election, but they just clap and okay, let's continue our election. And so
Yeah.
I think she says something about that, right? About how if there's complacency, then... And that's right before they cut her feed or her mic or whatever it was, I think it was. So she was actually getting to that, I think.
But it's pretty... it's pretty...
Bold
pretty
move still.
badass,
Yeah.
yeah.
oh yeah.
Anything else from the last few days you want to talk about?
No. I think that covers it.
That's a lot.
Yeah,
That's a lot.
That is.
Let's get to... we're going to get to our voices from inside Iran. We're going to go through a journey on 4 different places of Iran right now that we've got people waiting to speak to us. So let's get to it. Thank you, Pega.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shaya. And let's start. What's that?
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Shaya. Very formal. Thanking each other. Let's go, first of all, to Gilan province. Let's go to the north of Iran. And a financial manager... for the sake of this interview, we're going to call him Reza. He's been waiting on the line, and let's begin our Voices from Inside Iran, Part 7 here with Reza in the north of Iran. Reza, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. It's a pleasure to have this conversation with you.
Thank you so much for doing this, and thank you for putting yourself out there by speaking openly. First and foremost, I guess, you know, part of the reason I'm talking to you is I understand that you're someone who's been active in terms of this uprising, this revolution. Were you involved in the protests since September and the killing of Mahsa Amini?
Frankly speaking, I've been in protest just a couple of times, maybe 2-3 times. I'm actually not really that kind of brave guy. Everyone has their own character, and my character is like I'm just sitting and analyzing things and try to publish what I think I found out to the others.
I see. Well, I don't think anyone would blame anybody outside of Iran, cannot blame anybody in Iran if they don't want to go out in the streets. It takes an incredible amount of courage. It can be very scary, and even the fact that you went out a couple of times speaks to your own strength. When you say you're doing your part and you publish things, do you mean in social media?
Yes.
Okay. And so tell me what your perspective is today, 6 months into this uprising, that some thought would go away after a few weeks. Some thought is the absolute revolution that's going to be over soon. How would you describe the mood in Iran these days?
As a matter of fact, there is something in societies, we call it as entropy. It's kind of energy which is being saved somehow in the people in the society. So, however, this entropy is rising. It has to be a new equilibriums in the society or economy or whatever. So, with the size and variety of unsatisfaction there is between people, this revolution is not going to go down anyway. But of course, we need to be realistic. So people cannot be naturally be a 24-hour soldier fighting like revolutionaries every day for a long period of time.
Sorry, Reza, let me just stop you for a second. When you say the revolution is not going to go down, you mean that what do you mean by that?
I mean, there is going to be a revolution. There is going to be a regime change. People are angry and unsatisfied and sad with this regime we have, but we cannot expect them to continue this for a long time as non-stop.
I got you.
So,
I got you. And if I understand you correctly, then you are saying you are not alarmed or upset that there isn't tons of activity in the streets, say, every day right now, or over the last say month or two. You see this as part of a natural push and pull entropy, as you say, equilibrium of how this thing has to roll out, and people are naturally pacing themselves. Is that what you would say?
Exactly. It's just like the rest between two half times in a soccer game. It's just that. But the thing that we have to notice in this path is that the distance between every two movements are getting shorter and shorter, because there was a revolution, the revolution which ended up in this Islamic regime. Then it was like kind of peace for a decade. Then there was some movement. There it was peace. It happened after 7 years in 1377, I think, and then it was peace 10, 11 years later. And now from 96 in I'm mentioning the times in our calendar.
Sure. Yes.
Since then, it's been every year, then every 2 years, then every year,
Yes.
then every 6
Yes.
months.
Yes.
It gets shorter and shorter.
Yes. In terms of things becoming normalized, I mean, one of the debates that people are having in the Iranian community outside of Iran, with, for example, Nowruz coming, is how much do we have the desire or appetite to be dancing and celebrating in Nowruz when, we've just witnessed these executions and kids being killed, and we know that turmoil continues in Iran. How much is it disrespectful to be having parties at this time? Or on the other hand, should we be having those kind of events because that's exactly what the regime would not want us to do or not want Iranians to be involved in? What are the conversations you guys have about that inside Iran?
Okay, the conversation is like the majority things. Every piece of happiness is kind of betrayal to this movement or something like that. But if you're asking my point of view, I'd like people to have every kind of party they can when they can. One of the reasons is people are disappointed, and people will get disappointed when they are not reaching their goals at the checkpoints that they have made. So when people were shouting out at social media that this weekend is going to be the last weekend of Islamic Republic, and then it wouldn't accomplish, it would add some disappointment.
Sure.
Imagine someone using all kind of candies and, I don't know, fast food, and he says that I wanna make a six pack in a month, and then after 1 week of having fast and having workout, he'll say that it's too hard, let's forget about it.
Right.
So it's not realistic to ask people to don't be happy and don't not having parties, etc.
Right. The not being able to achieve the six pack is a realistic analogy for me. I understand that one. but would you say? I mean, I totally get what you're saying. I think perhaps early on, when there was some sense, maybe hope, that this would be a very quick turnaround, that the regime would fall within a month or two, there was more appetite for kind of curbing the normal rituals of life. But over a period of time, as you say, that's just not tenable. It's not possible to say, okay, everybody suspend everything. You can't eat normally, you can't work normally, you can't dress normally. It's just not realistic. How much do you follow what's happening outside of Iran in terms of all the activity in the diaspora, whether it's this so-called coalition or the big demonstrations in Toronto or Los Angeles or Brussels today? And how important is all of that to you?
Frankly speaking, to governments, I don't know if you're going to play that or not. To all the governments all over the world, this relationship between the countries, it's all about money. Okay, so they would sell this revolution as soon as they could, if it was in their beneficiary, but. With these marches all over the world in Western countries, now there are too much awareness between their own citizens. So the public will not accept the Western countries to have normal relationship with this regime again, even though if it's in their beneficiary the most. Even though hypothetically it happens, they can't just easily do that. They can't just announce that we are in good terms with Iranian Republic. It's not that easy now.
I think those are very important points that you make. Is it your sense that people inside Iran, or let me just ask you yourself, there seems to be a lot of excitement or enthusiasm, it seems, in the Iranian community outside of Iran for images like what we're seeing today? For example, there's a big demonstration in Brussels, and at the forefront, there's Hamid Ismailion and Ali Akhondi and Masih Alinejad walking together, and I see people posting that and getting lots of likes. And is that something that gets people energized and enthusiastic in your circles inside Iran as well, or do you think that that's something that we're more interested in outside here?
That's a little bit complicated, because for someone who is betrayed will have trust issues. So a society who has experienced betrayed in their trust will have trust issues. Okay, so there is no doubt that this movement needs leadership, needs at least a spokesman if not leadership, because eventually all sides, all parties needs to negotiate some terms at some point. Iranian regime, Western countries, opposition, they needed to know who are, they need someone to talk to. So this gathering, that this union between Hamed Ismailion and Mr. Pahlavi and the others is something good, something necessary, but we can't blame people for not trusting them. However, now they are a group. They are more trustworthy than it was than when it was only Mr. Pahlavi. It's not like that I don't like him or I don't respect him. It's just some old experience, because if you have read Mr. Khomeini's comments before the revolution, he was like, okay, I want nothing. I'm going to go to Iran, I go to Rome, I'm going to go to my school and teach my students, But when he came, then he decided to do the otherwise, So to sum up the answer to your very good question is that people knows that we need leadership, because there was this, as I think, wrong idea that this revolution is unique because it has no leadership. And I know that nothing will be done in no area, not a simple company with no leadership, So I hope that most people, and I think that most people know that we need the leadership, and now that they are a group, most people are open to them, are accepting them.
Got it. I understand. I that was very well said. I get what you're saying. There was a survey, a poll that came out 3 or 4 weeks ago from what is said to be a very legitimate European polling firm that said Reza Pahlavi's support, not just outside of Iran, but inside Iran, is at 70%. It's impossible for us to test that in any sort of visual or empirical way, because people obviously are not roaming around in the streets of Iran with photos of Reza Pahlavi. But does that make any sense to you? Would you accept that there's that kind of support for him?
I honestly don't know. I can't have any comment on that, because I'm the kind of person who tries to be careful about what he says. So since I have friends who thinks like me, and social media's algorithm makes me match up with others who thinks like me, so I can only see people like me. So I can't say that because I am seeing that many people, that those who are not very favorable to Mr. Pahlavi, so that's right or wrong. I'm sorry to say that.
I appreciate your measured response, and I now believe for sure that you're a financial analyst. You're definitely you're speaking with great nuance, and I appreciate that. What about the flip side, which is that, and I sort of ask everybody that when I speak to do these voices inside Iran, because I think one thing that we've learned in the last 5 or 6 months was, if there was any question or confusion about whether there's a great deal of support for this current Islamic Republic regime. Going into this fall, there were people who would very openly say, well, it's about half and half in Iran. Half the country supports the regime, half the country doesn't. It doesn't seem like that's the case. This latest survey shows 15% support or less for the Islamic Republic regime. In your own experience, And with your nuance as a financial analyst, I know you're not going to say anything crazy here, but I mean, is it, do you witness any support for the regime? And does it seem realistic to you that the support for the Islamic Republic regime is as low as 15% or less in Iran?
Let's say that Iranian government has something like 7 million people on their payroll as employees to the government. Okay, and if you multiply that number to 3 as their family members, that would be 21 million people. But still, I'd say that from my own experience, I have never come to know anyone who is a supporter of this regime. Never during my life.
Wait a minute. Let me clarify. You're saying you have never encountered in your work or your personal life in the north of Iran anyone that supports the regime?
I've never encountered someone personally working with or having any kind of relationship with that supports this regime, even though when they were on their payroll, even though when they're cops, when they are judges, when they are high-ranking officials, they don't support this ideology. They are just going on with whatever it is, because it's in their beneficiary to go on. So I think that among those 15% who are supporters of the regime, there would be at least 5 to 7, 8%, maybe more, people who are not who don't trust surveys, or somehow they thought it's more safe to say that we support the regime.
You think it's even lower? Right. You think it's even lower than that?
Yes, exactly.
So it's incredible. Do you mind me asking how old you are?
33.
You're 33. So you're saying
yes.
In 33 years of living in Iran, you've I mean, it's quite remarkable, really. I mean, this is a very important moment, because when you're inside Iran, you're living in a country, you're active, you have a professional job. You're saying you have never encountered anybody who supports this regime personally.
Yes, exactly.
Wow.
And it was even one of my concerns, which I was sharing in social media, that maybe if people threat the so-called Basijis or Sepahi, whatever, threat them less, maybe they will have this revolution much easier, because if you have read The Art of War, it's one of my favorite books, and all strategic books in management is based on that book. So if you have read that book, it says that if you know that you are going to overcome to an enemy, do not surround them. Leave them some way out, so they will back off. So you will accomplish you will achieve the land you want without any casualties on your part.
Mm-hmm.
But when you think, when you put your foot to a Basiji shoes, you will think that if this regime is gone, I will have no place to run. It's not like the last regime.
Right. They're cornered. I understand. If we corner them, they're like rabid animals. They can't. They're going to fight back, as opposed to giving them an out somehow. It's
exactly.
It's the same strategy people talk about in terms of the war in Ukraine. Find a way for Putin to get out of this so that he can save face somehow. Right. Reza, I must thank you very much for the time and for the thought that you put into the answers. And have you traveled much outside of Iran?
Just a little bit. I think, I don't know, 10, 12 countries.
Oh, 10. Okay, that's more than a little bit. You've traveled. Your English is very good. I mean, you're a great credit to you that you speak so well. And I thank you for your time, and I hope we get to talk again.
That would be vice versa. It was an honor to be at your service, and I was so glad to have this opportunity to talk to you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Have a good night.
This is Roqe, episode 240, Voices from Inside Iran, the seventh part of this series we do. And we are now going to go, is she ready? She is. We're going to go to Shiraz. And one of the brave frontline demonstrators that we've spoken to before. She's in her 20s. She's a graphic artist. She courageously opts to use her real name in these interviews, which is Behgol. She is in Shiraz. Hello, Behgol. Are you there?
Hey, I'm here. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm very happy to talk to you again. How have you been doing?
Very, very different moods from the last time I talked to you. It was really tough days. It was really the worst days of my life, but it's finished now. It's better now. And everything is better now. Thank God.
Okay, well, I'm curious to hear why you're saying that. You were very involved in protests, and at one point, your friend was arrested. I'll ask you about her in a moment. I remember there was a lot of drama. When you say it's better now, are you still active in terms of demonstrating against the regime?
As you know, I think I don't know. I think it's kind of stopped, or it's happening in the deeper levels that it's not in the streets, obviously, because it's nothing going on in the streets. So I have nothing to attend to. There's nowhere to attend to. But I wish it was that, and I wish I was attending, actually, but I'm not.
That's a pretty big deal because you were so involved before. How would you describe the mood in Shiraz these days?
Everything is, I can't say normal because nothing's normal. And we people, we know it's not normal. But, like a slept volcano. You know how it seems like it's slept, but it's still out there, like it's waiting for something to raid.
Sure.
It's the mood. This is when I walk in the streets, this is the energy I'm feeling. This is the vibe that everybody are waiting for the smallest thing to blow up, I think, to something like this. They are hiding their anger, and their anger is getting bigger inside their hearts.
But it's just below the surface, is what you're saying.
Yeah. Yes, this is what I'm trying to say.
But just anecdotally, when you go out on the street, do you wear a hijab?
No, definitely not. I throw all my hijabs out, and I even go to the university without hijab. I don't go to university now, but if I have something to do there and I have to go there, I don't wear hijab. And mostly I get into a huge fight, and it's nothing. It's okay. But I don't wear hijab.
What do you mean? Who did you get into a huge fight with?
Yes, they wouldn't allow me to enter my university's building. Can you imagine that? Because
I can't imagine that, because that's part of the whole issue of living in Iran, right? I mean, this is.
But after everything we gone through, after everything that happened, how could they tell me that you're not wearing the correct hijab? How dare they? I can't imagine. And I don't care about them. I honestly, I don't care about them, and I just do what I have to do. They are gonna speak anyway. They're gonna say these things anyway.
This is the Behkol I remember. So do you? So let me ask you this: would you say? I mean, given that you're walking around Shiraz right now defiantly, you've threw away all your rusadis, your headscarves, your hijabs. Would you say that the ground has significantly shifted? In other words, things are different today in terms of the way you live your life and the way you walk around the streets than they would have been, say, last summer?
It's yes, definitely different. I didn't wear hijab. Honestly, a lot of times they were always around my neck. But I see a lot of people who are wearing their hijab around their neck. For example, last year, if there was, for example, 10 out of 100 of us, now it's, I don't know, 80 out of 100, something like that.
Right.
And I don't feel alone somehow.
Right. Well, it sounds like you're not alone. But you know, one of the things that people are concerned about is that these little changes or some of these things shift. I mean, certainly, you know, based on and thanks to the defiance of young women like yourself in Iran. But even though but when these things shift, then people get a little complacent and go, okay, well, things have changed a little bit, and then there's not as much need to overthrow the regime. There's not as much need for a revolution. That would be the concern.
We still have the problems with our regime. It wasn't only hijab. I still don't have enough money to be calm for almost a week. This is my problem with this regime. Because I have every problems with this regime. How can I say it? Yeah. Every fucking problem with this regime.
You know, I quoted you last week because, you know, I told the story of how I had once asked you, what do you most want to do? What do you most want from a free Iran? Expecting that you would come. Yeah, now you know that it's the opening for you to come back with some massive declaration of, you know, human rights and or a new constitution or women's rights or something. And you said, I just want to walk my dog, and it was so powerful because that kind of basic human right that, I mean, people here can't even conceive of a situation where they're not allowed to walk their dog. And it's heartbreaking.
They never had to deal with this kind of drama. They never had this extra drama, these energy zombies. They're like energy zombies. They suck all of our positive energies from a lot of different ways. This is the tiniest way. Thank God they never have to deal with something like this.
Yes. So when you say, with your volcano analogy, when you say things are bubbling just beneath the surface, there's anger there, what do you feel like people are waiting for?
I don't know. They feel like we are powerful, but we need to get more powerful. We need to get more. Simply just we need to get more people and more powerful, because you saw how it's going. They are killing children and we are in bare hands. You know, we are kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say this out loud, but sometimes I feel a little bit weak against them. And maybe a lot of other people feel the same I feel right now. And maybe they need to feel a bit more powerful, or they need to believe that we are powerful enough. I don't know exactly, but we need something that I don't know what exactly it is, but we need it.
How much do you feel like the things calming down, or at least not being on the streets in terms of the big numbers, et cetera, that we saw in say October? I mean, some of this is obviously people get tired and you have to pace yourselves. You can't, you know, but how much of this would you say is based in fear, is based in the way the regime has cracked down on people and executed and all of that?
Maybe it's a little bit fear, but for example, the year 98, Aban 98, the fear was heavier, but now the fear is not that much heavy. But let me tell you something. In Revolution year 57, it wasn't always crowd in the streets shouting down for the dictator.
That's true. Yeah.
It was the crowd. Then there wasn't any crowd. Then, for example, a few months later, something else happened. I think it's a process of the revolution because they've been here for 44 years. They are bad devil creatures that their roots are so deep. We are destroying their roots, but it's a long process.
Yes, you're
we
very
are
right.
in the process.
That is what history shows, that no revolution happens literally overnight. Part of the reason I ask about fear is I remember that it was your friend Dana. You guys were, I think, together, and she got arrested, and it kind of became quite a story. I mean, we heard about her. She was one of these people that ended up doing a forced confession, and I think she's out of jail now, if I'm correct. But does someone like, for her, tell us first of all a bit about that experience. Like, what was it like when she was finally released for you?
Okay, it was definitely hell. I can't describe it even correctly, but seeing her with her eyes closed, with that ugly brown scarf, and sitting there saying the things that they wanted her to say, it was killing me, because I know her. I know how her heart works, how her brain works, and how her tongue works, how she speaks, how she thinks. I know this. And seeing her saying that things really killed me. And when I talked to her when she got out, I don't know if she really meant this or not, but she said, I asked about you when I was there. I knew how are you. I know how my mom is. But this is what she said. But she thinks that it was harder for us outside because we didn't know what she was doing. We didn't know if she was tortured, if she's being hit, if she's having a stomachache, a headache, she's sad, she's crying. We didn't know what she's doing. And this not knowing was killing us. And for her, it was, I can't even imagine what she gone through.
Does she, when I ask about fear, I mean, has that experience created the conditions where she, for example, doesn't want to speak out anymore, doesn't want to demonstrate, doesn't want to be, as active as she would have been a few months ago?
A little bit, yeah. But I think this is I think this is natural because you know what she's been through, and she being terrified of these people. I think she's right, but I'm not. Maybe because I wasn't in that situation. I'm not. I was shouting in my alley today alone with my dog in the morning, shouting in the streets alone.
What were you shouting?
Down for the dictator, woman life, freedom.
Really? You went out in the street by yourself this morning and screamed "Mark back dictator"?
Yes, but not in the streets, in my alley.
What does it mean, in my alley? Is that right outside your house?
Yes.
I see.
In my neighborhood.
Uh-huh. How does your dog react when you're screaming like that?
My dog first stopped. He looked at me for a second, and then she kept walking. I think
she's like,
tell herself.
Yeah.
I think he told himself, "What a crazy mom I have."
Right. He's used to mom. Yeah. Let me ask you this, because I was just asking our previous guest who was in the north of Iran. You're further south. I was asking him about a lot of us in the Iranian community around the world are confused a little bit about how we should be dealing with, for example, Nowruz coming up, whether we should be having parties, whether we should be allowing ourselves to I mean, even if we have a lot of us don't even have the feeling for it, but if we do to party or to dance or whatever, or is that somehow disrespectful or somehow, not the right way to act at a time when, Iran is still under the hold of this regime and kids have died and people have been executed? What is it like for you inside Iran? Do you feel the pressure to not party somehow, or do you think that that's another way of defying the regime? What do you guys say to each other?
I'm going to say my totally personal opinion. Me, myself, I never really loved Nowruz. I never really understood this excitement about Nowruz. I didn't really get it. But not these days, a few years ago till now, I've been studying astrology. And I learned that only the Shamsi calendar is the correct calendar of the zodiac.
Okay.
Not the other ones. And this is because the Aries is starting, and this is the correct beginning of the new circle of the horoscopic terms. And I think it's a new energy that we are celebrating.
But what about in general?
In
general, forget the spring equinox, forget Nowruz, just in general. If on a Friday night you see that there's people, I mean, I'm just curious to get your feeling about whether you mind that, or whether it doesn't make any difference to you if people are there are a lot of people who feel like people need to not be too happy or enthusiastic at a time like this. What do you feel about that?
Yeah, obviously not too happy, but what is in sitting in crying? Is it helping anyone? No. So we should at least get our energies correct, because we are all connected. At least with crying and just being sad and doing nothing is going to work. Nothing is going to get better. And we are kind of letting zombies sucking our energies. With being sad, we are feeding zombies. We are giving them our good feeling. We are giving them our positive energies with being sad. So what's the point in being sad? It's not changing anything. So let's do something that changes something.
Gotcha.
For example, let's focus on the energy of the people who are fighting against the Islamic Republic, and let's think about them and just dance.
All right.
Get our hearts connected to them, and I don't know, stare at the clouds. Stand in front of the sun. I don't know. Do something that makes us feel good and get our hearts connected to let others feel good. Because sadness is not going to help anyone.
I got you. So if as somebody who, a young woman who's in Shiraz who went out into her alley this morning and screamed "Death to the Dictator" with her dog, and who feels, you said earlier in our chat today, feels somewhat alone sometimes. How much do you follow, Behgol, what's happening outside of Iran? How much do you follow these big demonstrations that are happening and these big meetings of opposition people and 80,000 people in LA and in Toronto and in Brussels today? Do you follow that stuff? And if so, does it affect you? Does it make you happy? Does it inspire you? Or does it really not make that much of a difference?
It does. It really inspires me. But when I see my own country being crowded, I feel more inspired. But they are still our people. They are still with our hearts. And I like it. And I get kind of like someone supporting us, this kind of feeling. And I don't say it's not useful. It is useful because we've come so far. Imagine 5 months ago, we've never thought that we can come this far.
Yes.
But we did. And this is all tiny steps for that big event. These are all tiny steps. These are all tiny drops that make our cup full.
Got you. How much do you and your friends, your circle, talk about leadership and different leadership candidates? And I mean, there's a lot of talk in the Iranian community outside of Iran about who we're supposed to support and whether we want a coalition or whether we like Reza Pahlavi or Masih al-Najad or Hamid Ismailion, or how much do you guys talk about that?
Actually, we don't talk about it because me personally, I don't have a lot of information to talk about this. But I don't want the same shit to happen again. I just don't want this. I want
How
to
would
be
the same shit happen again? Tell us.
the same shit would happen again if another dictator in another costume comes to us. Another one who wants only the best for themselves. We don't need them because they separate themselves from us. Something like we are not one. We need something who thinks that we are really one, who look at us like they look at their own families. You know what I'm talking about? The person who is among us, between us, the person who is us. This kind of person should lead us. This kind of person can be our voice. But I don't have enough information about people who are able to do this.
Is there anybody in
You know?
particular inside Iran that inspires you, that you think, wow, I wish this person would emerge as one of our real leaders?
Yeah, my father.
Oh.
The only person I adore, kind of, my father. But no.
Is he
Seriously,
willing to take over the leadership? I mean, maybe he's
for me, yes. For the country, I don't think so. Just kidding. But no, really, I don't know anyone. I'm just so confused in this subject. This subject, I'm really confused. I don't know anything about it. I just don't want the same shit to happen again.
When you said, I've been asking people, I want to ask everybody today before I let you go, what kind of evidence you see that the regime in Iran has any support amongst the people. I'm assuming that most people, nobody in your direct circle is a fan of this Islamic Republic regime. But when you said you go out and you get into fights, is that with people who, because you're not wearing your hijab, is that with people who are actively supporting the regime? Or is that with some sort of a Basij person saying you're wearing your scarf the wrong way?
No, I don't think the people who say these things to me are supporting the regime. I think they are scared of the regime and they are just doing what they've been told like a robot. I don't think that they believe in this. The people who still believe in this are, I think, very tiny amount, very tiny.
Do you see any of those people? Do you meet people who support the regime?
No, not really. I haven't seen anyone who supports the regime for, I don't know, a lot of time. More than months, maybe years. No, not 3 years. A lot of months, many months. I haven't seen anyone who supports the regime.
Let me ask you a final question. You know, we started this conversation, I was saying how you're doing, and you said, actually, I'm doing really well. I was feeling like I was in hell before, and you were referencing the time when you were demonstrating a lot, and you aren't now. Some people would interpret that as to say that you think things are okay or they've gotten better in Iran, and so I don't want to give you a chance in case anybody misunderstands that. I mean, how are you still hopeful that that this revolution sees its way through in the coming months or year, or are you more okay with the way things are today than you would have been 4 months ago?
No, I will never be okay until the Islamic Republic will fall. But I think, as I told you, the revolution is a long way. And we are doing it. It's a slow process. It's really hard. It's a slow process, but we are in the process. And I want nothing more than our freedom. I want nothing more than this. And the day that they are gone is my birthday, I think. I will be rebirthed for the second time.
Well, and you'll know exactly what that means on that date because you're an astrologer now.
Yeah, I don't know when that day will be, but maybe around 2024, something like this.
Hopefully sooner than that. I really always like speaking to you. It's really insightful. You have a great energy, and you have you are incredibly brave for what you've done in the past and what you continue to do. You use your real name. I really appreciate it. Thanks for doing this, and stay in touch. Okay.
Thank you. It means a lot.
Bye bye.
Take care. Good night.
This is Roqe, episode 240, The Uprising, Voices from Inside Iran. All right, let's go to Tehran. And my next guest is a film director and musician in Tehran who's been very active in protesting and activism in Iran since September and is still doing so. We will go now to Sam, which is his real name. It's good to have him back on. Sam, are you there in Tehran?
Hey, yes.
Hey, sir. How are you? It's nice to talk to you again.
Thank you so much. I'm good. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm happy to hear your voice. So, where we left off, the last time we spoke to you, you were attending protests. You had talked about how things were migrating from major street protests to what you called a kind of a street war, and more of a tactical battle on the streets. And then, of course, that was probably 2 or 3 months ago, the last time we spoke to you. So first of all, are you still actively involved in the uprising?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And how would you describe the mood in Tehran these days, in a nutshell?
I think it has shifted. So it's become more like a traditional way of protest, which is like once a month, which was actually the same like in the 2009 protests too. Like, I think that's how most protests around the world go when it comes to revolutions, that it's like once a month or at most twice a month. But I think that's what has happened in the winter. So there was one in January, one in February, and now we'll see how it goes.
Sam, would you say that slowing down or different pacing of the protests is reflective at all of a change in attitude? Are people, have you noticed the cross section of people sort of giving up or going, okay, well, it didn't happen this time, or is it reflective of a more pacing yourselves strategy somehow?
I think it has caused this way of thinking that, everyone has gone home. But I think this sense of this feeling of hopelessness is actually creating itself, because I think being in the streets every day, like for 70 or 90 days, that was, I think, the exception. But the good thing was that it was very damaging for the government. It was like it created a lot of momentum, but the negative of that was that once the movement became like once a month or twice a month, then people started thinking that, what if this is the end? But I think realistically, this is how most of revolutions go.
There is a narrative that says, and I think this is shared by maybe some of my family and friends in Iran who maybe were out early at some of the protests and have basically said the extreme crackdown, the detention, the torture, and then, of course, some of the executions that have taken place by the regime, at the hands of the regime, has created a chill, has naturally created this situation where there are people afraid to go out more so than they would have been, say, in September or October. Do you believe that's true?
We are all in our own bubbles, so I'm not completely sure. But I think because the crackdown was harsh from the first day, from day one, a lot of our friends were arrested in the first week or two, and still it went on for 90 days at least, nonstop. That questions this narrative a little bit, because if it was people being afraid of being in the street, then why did it go on for so long after they cracked down?
Mm-hmm.
And even after the executions, still it went on for, I think, 20, 30 more days after the executions.
When you say everybody's in their own bubble, which bubble are you in? How would you describe your bubble?
I mean, in terms of attitudes, because people like learn what's happening in the streets from each other, from the people they know. I have people who think that maybe people are scared and are not coming out, but most people I know are hopeful, because like even the once in a month movements that people go in the streets, those are still like widespread in Iran, and those are like almost every neighborhood in Tehran. So like one of them was a week ago, right?
Yep.
Thursday, yeah. And that one was almost every neighborhood in Tehran and a lot of cities in Iran. So because those one days are still very large and impactful, I think there are people who are still very hopeful.
Yeah, and I should caution, I guess, myself and both of us to not be too Tehran-centric, although I'm asking you about Tehran, in our thinking. I guess if you were in Zahedan, if you're in Balochistan, or if you're in Kurdistan, you'd be less likely to say the protests have calmed down or are happening once a month. Do you guys in Tehran follow what's happening in those other regions, and do you think those protests, say the ones that we see out of Sistan and Balochistan, do they have any impact on people in Tehran at this point?
I think so. Yeah, I think they remind us. They're one of the reasons that we don't think of it as a negative thing necessarily, because they're keeping the movement going, and we know that okay, it's still out there. People in their homes are still a part of this uprising. So I think that's what's keeping people hopeful.
Sam, we hear so much about the dire state of the Iranian economy, the currency in free fall, the inflation in skyrocketing, the horrible situation when it comes to the economy. Do you, as somebody on the ground there, how does that intersect with the revolution? Does it sort of take people's minds away from, we need to replace this regime and right now we have to focus on getting milk and eggs somehow, or does it actually amplify the desire to want to change this regime from your viewpoint? I know you can't do this as a social scientist with an empirical study, but I'm curious what you feel about that.
If anything, it will amplify the uprising, because it's gone so far that like people, it can't realistically take people's mind off the government, because when you can't buy the things you need anyway, something like this can't like take your mind off the government. It will actually focus your mind on the fact that this government is not a sustainable way of living.
Yes. Can I ask you about your view on all of the activity outside of Iran? I'm going to ask you about some of the coalition type conversations and leadership conversations. But first and foremost, when you see the big rallies continuing in places like Toronto, the huge one that was in Los Angeles a couple of weeks ago, I'm assuming you see it on social media or whatever. What impact do you believe that has right now for people inside Iran?
I think it makes us more hopeful and shows us that there are a lot of other people who are capable of raising their voice, who are willing to do so. And I think the best they can do is this, to reflect the voice of people inside. And I think in that sense, it does inject a positive attitude towards the people inside.
Okay. There is a a preoccupation. I might even say an obsession with in the global Iranian community, especially outside of Iran, about leadership and who needs to be the spokespeople and who needs to oversee a transition and who are the leaders. And I say that in a somewhat perhaps a cheeky way, but I think some people are coming at this in a very honest way, where they think, nothing can change if we don't have some guidance, and we need people to be the official spokespeople to other nations and leaders and all of that. Is there, from your standpoint, as much conversation inside Iran about leadership as there seems to be outside?
I think there is serious conversation about these stuff because everyone, on the social media is talking about it, and because people have experienced the previous revolution and how if one person takes over, the revolution can completely change its course and become the opposite of what it's supposed to become. So I think people are cautious about that, and I think it's not a bad conversation to have, and it's not a bad thing that people are cautious and people think about who is trying to lead, and is anyone organically becoming the leader of the revolution, or do we need to talk about the transition team before a revolution succeeds, because usually after a revolution succeeds, then the transition team starts to form. But I think just having these conversations can be very helpful. I think it's not necessarily negative or positive. It just depends on how that conversation goes. If people are fighting over it, or if people are just learning and trying to be cautious about the future. But I think in itself, it's not a bad thing.
It's interesting. You're the second person in a row now who's talked about caution that people have in Iran. The last guest we spoke to was in the north of Iran. He was saying, after years of betrayal from different leadership, etc., of what people are saying, at least we're trepidatious about wanting to jump into supporting anybody. We just had an academic, an author on last week, Dr. Fatali Moqaddam, who has written a new book called Political Plasticity. And his message that he's sort of been honing for years is one that maybe a lot of Iranians who are particularly enthusiastic right now about regime change would not want to heed. But I mean, he sort of talks about the swing towards authoritarianism in general in the 21st century in countries around the world, and says realistically, any revolutions that we can look at, especially in recent years, have not resulted in democracy, and oftentimes result in a continuity of authoritarianism. So you go from one form of dictatorship to another. Things change on the surface, but you end up in the sort of same place with respect to freedom and democracy. It's not the most heartwarming message, but is that the kind of thing that you think about or talk about with your other? I ask you this as somebody who's not just somebody sitting in Iran, but somebody who's been an activist for in this revolution, and therefore must have contemplated this kind of thing. What do you have to say about somebody who does that kind of analysis and comes and says, look, at the chances are not great. We have to really work at this to actually for this to end up in a good place like democracy?
Yeah, I think that's exactly the kind of analysis that we need, because it is true. It's very easy to find the data on that and figure out that almost no revolution, more than 95% of the revolutions lead to another dictatorship. And we have already tried that once. But when a government proves to its people that there's no way they're going to accept change, there's no way they're going to change and move even the slightest bit towards a democracy, then when people are sure of that, a revolution happens. whether we want it or not. And I think these conversations are necessary to have. It is important to know that the experiences of people around the world about revolutions, why those movements have not ended in democracy as the people wanted, and try to at least avoid those pitfalls.
What do you think of the coming together of some of these prominent I don't know what we call them, public figures, opposition leaders, or what? So Reza Pahlavi and Masih al-Nejad and Hamid Ismailioun and Ali Karimi and others. Is that something that you have a lot of enthusiasm for?
I think that also is like one of those things that it is not necessarily positive or negative. I mean, it is positive that it is uniting a lot of people, at least outside Iran, and a lot of people inside Iran too. But I think if we are not realistic about the things that can be done outside Iran, then we're gonna just be disappointed. Or
what do you mean by that? What do you mean by realistic about the things that can be done outside of Iran?
Because I think the actual revolution will happen inside Iran. Otherwise, it's not going to be a revolution. I mean, if actually people, the other governments intervene more than a certain amount, it's not going to be an actual revolution. I guess it would be a regime change. So realistically, a revolution happens inside. If that group of people do their best to support us, to make sure other governments are not supporting our government in cracking down on us, that's extremely positive, and that's great. Because I think the revolution happens inside Iran, either the fact that they're not going to be able to lead the revolution inside is going to disappoint us, or worst case scenario, if they actually do try to be the leaders of the revolution, it might end up like being like the previous revolution and Khomeini, and like just making a leader for a leaderless revolution. And then it will take us one step closer to potential dictatorship in the future.
It's a really good point. It's perhaps a simple one when you actually think about it, but it's a good point that as much as we can get excited about 80,000 people in Los Angeles on the streets, that isn't actually the revolution. That's those of us in the diaspora aspiring to try and help make a difference. You guys are doing the work inside Iran, and that is where it's going to have to take place. That said, we hear about surveys or sentiments that there is a lot of popularity of someone like Hamid Ismailioun or Masih or Reza Pahlavi inside Iran. Is there not?
Yeah, I mean there is popularity inside Iran. I mean, because there's no free polls for us to figure out how much this popularity actually is. We don't know exactly, but yeah, of course, like people like Ali Karimi and Golshifte, they're celebrities. They do have a lot of fans, and also people like Masih have worked a lot in previous years. She has a lot of influence on people, and she is a very well-known activist. Ismailioun, because of what he has done in the past, at least 5 years, he is very well known. He's a very well-known activist too. And Pahlavi, because he's the son of the previous Shah, so he is also very well known. But how the weight of popularity, I don't think. I mean, I'm not sure. I can only see my friends and the people I know around me, and some of them are more popular than other. When it comes to leadership, I think people are more cautious, even if they do have a positive opinion of these group of people outside. When the topic goes to leadership, then they become more cautious, because I guess, and I think that is a positive caution to have. That is a good caution to have. because being an activist won't hurt us in any way, but becoming a leader of a revolution, then that can hurt us if
Gotcha.
It's not where we want to go.
Gotcha. Let me end off by asking you about the sentiment about the regime in Iran, because something that I got really upset about, that I did an opening essay about last week, was that in the coverage of the Bistado Bahman, of the demonstrations, let's call it, or the spectacle, the regime-sponsored demonstrations to mark the anniversary of the 1979 revolution a week or two ago. Mm-hmm. Some of the coverage in the West, and particularly I pointed out that in the Financial Times, it said, look at all these people in the streets in Tehran, and this shows that the regime has regained the confidence of the public in Iran.
That's absurd.
Yeah, you'd be hard pressed to find an Iranian anywhere in the fucking world who would agree with that sentiment, except perhaps the writer and some of the people who, have an agenda of some kind. I don't quite understand it. But with that said, as somebody who is there, what did you witness on that anniversary? And do you see, because as I pointed out in my essay, that that would have been the day. That would have been the day for the regime to strut its stuff and bring millions of people in the streets. What did we actually see in Tehran on that day?
I think it was very underwhelming, and I think because they have been doing this show for so many years now, we already know that, okay, you can look outside your window and see there's maybe 500 people, and then look at the same location on TV and see them showing millions of people. They use archival footage. A lot of times people actually in the days following figure out the actual date of that archival footage. Sometimes they're so sloppy in this show that you can actually see the dates of the archival footage in their footage. Sometimes they use the same archival footage for 3 different cities at the same time, which is very funny. I think for the people who actually do want to know what's going on, it's pretty easy to figure out when it's real and when it's archival footage, whether we like it or not. For example, for 10 years or no 5 years ago, for Qasem Soleimani's ceremony, there were a lot of people, whether we like it or not, right. And it wasn't archival. But for the anniversary of the revolution, the 79 revolution, you can see there's actual phone footage of people filming them, and it's really underwhelming.
Yeah. Do you the gentleman the young guy I was just speaking to, who's in a city in the north of Iran before we came to you, he was saying it's at the point where he lives that first of all, he said he's 33 years old and he's never met someone. He's a financial analyst. He said he's never met someone personally in his life who supports the regime, which I just thought was astounding. But he was saying that you wouldn't meet someone at this point either, because people, if you actually did support the regime, you couldn't go out in the streets where he lives and actually say it. People would, not have it. Is that true in Tehran as well?
I mean, I think it's less true than any other city in Tehran, because Tehran is such a big city that no one knows each other that much. So you can go around and say that you support the regime and still not have a lot of negative consequences. But I imagine that in smaller cities, that is true. And I know for a fact that somewhere in Zahedan, that is true, that if you do actually support the government, it's not very easy these days to say it out loud, because everyone knows each other in those cities.
A final question. As ever, I so appreciate your intellect and your perspectives that you educate us with when we get in touch with you. Thanks for doing this again. And yeah, you're one of those guys who does it bravely with your own name too. It's you're a courageous guy. Sam, would you, if you were to tap into how you're feeling, and back to those first conversations that we had in September and October and November, where are you at in terms of your hopes for a happy ending, if you will, of where this uprising is going with respect to the prospective end of the regime in Iran and real change?
I mean, that is a very difficult question to answer. In terms of, like, if we define our success as the regime going, I think the same amount hopeful of that as I was, like, back in October. I think it takes time, and I think because of that, like, 90-day streak, I think now people are coming to the terms that it will take time. Our government does have enough money and enough support, even if minority support, it does have enough support to go on for longer. But I think it seems to be inevitable for it to happen, because the majority of people obviously don't want the government, and they are willing to say it out loud too. And I think that shows that it is going to happen. But if the question is, first of all, when it's going to happen, is it going to be too late in terms of where we are financially and in terms of our environment? Because they are doing a lot of damage to the country, and it might be too late to save this country if it's like happens in 3-4 years. I don't know. I mean, other people should attest to that. But in terms of the timing and also in terms of what comes next, I'm trying to be optimistic, and I think everyone in Iran and in the diaspora are trying to make sure that if the change happens and when the change happens, it's going to be for the better. And I think that's the best we can do.
Sam, thank you for this as ever.
No problem. No problem.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
This is Roqe episode 240, and now let's go to a city in the north of Iran and a painter who's been very involved in the protests. We've spoken to her actually once before. I think she had just been arrested, if I recall the last time we spoke to her. For the purposes of this interview, we will call her Marjan. Marjan, are you there?
Hello. Yeah, I am here.
Hi, good to talk to you again. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm okay.
Marjan, the last time we spoke to you, you had been arrested. Mm-hmm. Are you still getting bothered by authorities?
Yeah, they call me with unknown number and sometimes and check my Instagram page.
And when they call you, what do they say?
فقط میخوان مثلا در حال مثلا در حد تذکر و اینا. حالا خیلیش هم جواب نمیدم.
چطوری میدونی مثلا که وقتی که when they are checking your Instagram, how do you know it's them?
یه سری اکانت ها هستن که متوجه شدم اونا هستن که همشون یه توی بایوشون مثبت 18 داره. و من اینا رو یه دور بلاک کرده بودم و بعد دفعه بعد که رفتم نگاه کردم دیدم همشون پرچم ایران شدن، در صورتی که دفعه مثلا همینطوری می اومدم پیجم رو نگاه میکردم ولی بعدش طرفدار حکومت شده بودن. واسه همین حواسم هست و نگاه میکنم استوریا رو کی میبینه و اینا.
Do you think that they do this to scare you so that you won't continue to protest? Is that the idea?
Yes.
Is it working? Are you scared? Does it prevent you from going? Do you stay silent because they're doing this?
Just a little. خب میدونین الان وقتی یکی رو میگیرن دیگه در اومدنش یعنی آزاد کردنش دیگه اصلا خیلی عجیب غریب میشه. واسه همین نه اینکه بترسیم یا کوتاه بیایم، اما فکر میکنم مدل مخالفت کردن یه کمی عوض شده.
چطوری عوض شده؟
مثلا چون جمعیتی هم که یه تایمی خب خاموش شده بود، واقعا همه چی انگار آروم شده بود، یکم هم همه ناامید شده بودن، ولی دوباره انگار مثلا داره به جوش میاد. ولی چون تو خیابون اومدن کمتر شده، اینا همه سعی میکنن یه کمی مخفیانه تر همه کاراشون رو انجام بدن. مثلا الان شعارنویسی خیلی زیادتر شده.
Maybe let me just finish asking you about the being arrested. It sounds like you're saying حتی وقتی که آزادت میکنن آزاد نیستی، یعنی they keep reminding you that you're somehow on their list, huh?
درسته. یه تعهدی دادی که اگه تکرار شه هی مرحله بیشتر میشه دیگه. دفعه بعد اگر بگیرنت مثلا زندان داره.
وقتی که میگی که یه کمی آروم شده بود، did you ever get the sense that the uprising, the inqilab, the revolution, has died, or does it just are people still very much in terms of your friends, the people you see, very much looking to change this regime, but they're finding other ways to do this instead of just street protests?
نمورده بود، ولی خب فکر میکنم که خاصیت همه انقلاب ها همینطوریه دیگه. نمیشه که توی 1 ماه یا 2 ماه همچین اتفاق بزرگی بیفته و شاید مردم به یه تایم استراحتی احتیاج داشتن، نه اینکه هیچ کاری نکنن، ولی انگار مثلا هی داره مدلش عوض میشه. الان همینی که دنیا متوجه شده و الان همینی که تو مونیخ دعوت نشدن، همین خب از همون اولش اینا سرچشمه میگیره دیگه. شاید مدلش داره عوض میشه، ولی اینکه نه خاموش شده نه مرده.
That's perfect. I actually want to ask you about Munich and what's happening outside. But first of all, let me ask you a general question, Marjan. How would you describe the mood in Iran these days? I mean, you know, when we were talking to people 2 or 3 or 4 months ago, they would say people are angry, people are sad, people want change. There has been some conversation recently where they say, everyone's back to normal, life is going on as it was before in Iran. How would you describe the mood?
خیلی ها خب در ظاهر به زندگی عادی برگشتن، ولی خب برای همه اینطوری نیست. یعنی برای شخص خود من اینطوری نیست. من هنوز نتونستم به زندگی عادی برگردم، ولی خب یه چیزی هم که هست نمیشه از همه خورده گرفت، برای اینکه 5-6 ماه شده و یه توان مردم انگار تموم شده. نه به این حالت که دیگه خشمگین نیستن. اون خشم اولیه آره درسته نیست، اولش خیلی همه پرشور بودن، ولی اینقدر که گرفتن و کشتن انگار یه ترسی هم اومده. یعنی تو خود شهر ما چون خیلی گرفتن واقعا یه ترسی اومده و اصلا برای اینکه تیر بزنن هیچ مثلا از اینایی ندارن، ابایی ندارن راحت این کارو میکنن. ولی که خب همین که گفتم دیگه، مدلش عوض شده، مدل همه چی عوض شده و اینکه اینقدر هم تو این چند هفته دلار رفته بالا، واقعا یکی از دغدغه‌های خیلی از آدم‌ها اینه که چطوری زندگیشون رو
Right. It's economically, it's pretty bad in Iran these days, right?
Yeah.
Do you notice that yourself? I mean, with you or your friends or your family, is it affecting everyday life, like the cost of things? You know, is it clear that it's a difficult situation?
آره خب معلومه، یعنی واقعا هر هفته‌ای که میگذره باید نسبت به هفته قبلتر شما کمتر اون سبد خریدتون رو کوچیک‌تر کنین. فکر کنین دیگه قبلا اینطوری بود که سال به سال این اتفاق میافتاد، بعد 6 ماه، الان دیگه هر هفته شما باید نگران باشین که هفته دیگه همه چی گرون میشه و قشنگ هیچ برنامه ریزی دیگه نمیشه کرد.
Right. Marjan, how much do people talk about leadership, like the future of Iran and leadership of who's going to be the leaders? How much does that conversation happen inside Iran? It's something that seems to get talked about a lot outside of Iran. Are you guys talking about that in Iran as well?
بیشتر الان فکر میکنم همه اول دلشون میخواد که اینا برن و با چیزی که الان درست شده، اون همبستگی که الان هست، فکر میکنم چیزیه که همه الان میپسندنش. یعنی دور و بریای من همه الان راضی‌اند در این که اتفاقاتی که تو خارج از کشور داره میفته.
I mean, there's been a lot of attention given outside of Iran to masalan images of opposition leaders coming together. There's a conference in Washington. There was Munich, as you say. There's Brussels today. Are people inside Iran following all of this closely? Are they as interested in whether Reza Pahlavi and Masih Alinejad and Hamid Ismailioun are seen together or showing solidarity? Are you guys, I don't want to say do you care, because obviously I think you care, but I mean, is that a priority inside Iran?
اینکه به یک شخص باشه رو من خودم نمیپسندیدم، چون که قرار گروه‌های مختلف باشه، ولی الان که چند نفر هست و صحبت‌هاشون رو گوش دادم، به نظرم که آره واقعا احتیاج داریم که یک گروهی وجود داشته باشن، وگرنه دوباره توی ایران اصلاح طلبا رو میارم بالا به نظرم، چون دارن انگاری که این کارو میکنن و یه حقوق قدیمیه دیگه دوباره، و فکر میکنم باید یه گروه باشن خارج از ایران که صدای ما رو برسونن. ولی خودم با اون قضیه وکالت دادم خیلی موافق نبودم. الان که یه گروه تشکیل شده خیلی حس بهتری دارم.
Right. Is there any particular person? I mean, I know it's just you and your friends. You're not all of Iran. I can't ask you something to represent all of Iran, but in your circle, is there any particular person or leader that you guys like, that you in particular you talk about and say, this person would be really good to be leading Iran or being in charge somehow?
الان فکر نمی کنم کسی بتونه در داخل ایران، یعنی اصلا بهش حق صحبت کردن نمیدن، صداش در نمیاد که بتونه لیدر بشه. برای همین احتیاج داریم که خارج از کشور باشه که از این مرحله گذر کردیم. بعد آدمای زیادی هستن که میتونن توی انتخابات سالم.
خب مثلا کی میتونی who are you thinking of when you say that? Hossein Ronaqi or Nasrin Sotoudeh, or who's in your mind?
تمام کسایی که دقیقاً مثل حسین رونقی و نسرین ستوده هستن تعدادشون هم خیلی زیاده. همه اینا میتونن، نه به اینکه به عنوان اینکه یک نفر باشه، چون دیگه واقعا فکر کنم از این مرحله باید گذر کنیم که یک نفر همه حرفا رو بزنه. یه مجلسی تشکیل بشه که همه آدما توش یه نماینده داشته باشن. همینطور همه چون ایران خیلی گروه‌های مختلفی داره، لور، کرد، گیلک، اینا همشون یکی رو داشته باشن. چون باید یکی از مثلا خود بلوچا باشه که حرفشون رو بزنه. یعنی ما تا قبل این اتفاقات من خودم شخصا نمیدونستم که چقدر زندگی سختی دارن.
Wow. So this uprising, this inqilab has created the conditions where you inside Iran are learning more about other Iranians, or other people in Iran. That's pretty amazing. Let me ask you a question that may seem like a silly question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Do you, in the north city of Iran that you're in, do you encounter or see anyone who is supportive of the Islamic Republic regime? I mean, do you, in your daily life, actually, notice that there are people who are supporting the regime?
توی کسی که نشون بده نه نمیبینم. یعنی الان کسی فکر نمی‌کنم در شهری که ما هستیم جرأتش رو داشته باشه که علنا اینو بگه. ولی که میدونم کسایی هستن که طرفدارشون هستن، میشناسمشون، ولی خب علنا چیزی نمیگن.
Interesting. یعنی اگر طرفدار رژیم باشن میترسن چیزی بگن؟
تو شهر ما بله.
Interesting. So it's really turned around. What about on the anniversary of the revolution, 22 Bahman? Did you see a lot of people showing their support for the regime, or did it feel, when they did it feel fake or masnui somehow?
آره فیک بود. ما چیزی ندیدیم اصلا هیچ شباهتی مثل سالهای قبل نداشت.
Let me ask you a final question. مرسی که وقتی گذاشتی واسه ما. Do you Marjan, I mean, as somebody who has been on the protests, as somebody who was arrested, as somebody who obviously cares about this, today, February now of 2023, are you hopeful? Are you optimistic that the change that you have wanted is going to come in the coming, say, months?
این که تغییر پیدا میکنه که بدون شک تغییر پیدا میکنه. یعنی اصلا در این مورد هیچ شکی وجود نداره، ولی فقط شاید قبلا خیلی امیدوار بودم که خیلی زود این اتفاق بیفته، ولی الان شاید حس میکنم یک کمی طولانی تر بشه. شاید به 1 سال طول بکشه، شاید 2 سال طول بکشه، ولی این که خب نباید ناامید شد.
Marjan, merci. Thank you so much for this today.
مرسی از شما.
خوشحال
شدم.
Be careful of yourself, okay?
چشم.
خداحافظ.
خدا نگهدار.
That's Marjan in the north of Iran, and that is full time for Roqe for today. Thank you to all of those people who join us from inside Iran. It's really, really special to get those perspectives from inside the country. Thanks to the amazing team who put this show together. Roham, Anahita, Parisa, Pega, Aghay Merdad, Khanama Negin, and Grubishaya. Thank you to all of you out there supporting us and sharing our content. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already. Remember, you can become a Roqe member on our Patreon page by going to our website, roqemedia.com, and pressing the Support Us button. You can find me on Insta at Jian Ghomeshi. Thank you again. Mizun Bashi.